Hey everyone, I'm David de Hilster, and you've reached Saturday Science Chats. Yes, you've reached Saturday Science Chats. Yes, I'm doing this once a month, but that is going to change. I keep promising that, but I think I came up with a real formula. You got to try ideas, and some of them work, some of them don't. We're going to talk a lot about that today. But again, you have reached these Saturday morning get-togethers sponsored by the John Chappell Natural Philosophy Society and Dissident Science. And of course, today we're going to be talking about new directions. Are we missing the biggest audience of all? Obviously, I think so. And the new directions, I think, are going to really help even this format that we're doing here. I'm going to put things in a little context and history. I want to thank Nick Percival for him and I having a conversation more one way than anything, but at least to bounce off ideas. He's always great to talk with. And thank you very much, Nick. So I do want to thank you because no matter, even if you don't like me, I know I have people in the chat that come here a lot of times, just not a fan of mine, but they're here and they're critically thinking. I think a lot of the animosity sometimes comes from my own opinion that I interject, like any person is going to do. But I think the most important thing to remember, even the people that are not my fans here, I want to congratulate you for being here, because watching this channel means you're a critical thinker. As you can see, I've got my critical thinking t-shirt on from one of our conferences, and it certainly is something I'm going to even to be talking about today. It's just something that isn't done, even amongst ourselves. We really just got to do that. But I want to just congratulate you guys, and please subscribe to our channels. We're over 1,000 subscribers now for the CNPS video YouTube channel, and also well over 4,000 for my Dissident Science YouTube channel. And I want to thank everybody who supports this and comes by and listens to this as recording, because I do know people do that. And so again, it's greatly appreciated. We have to keep things in perspective so we don't fight amongst ourselves so much. But of course, our mission, of course, is to promote critical thinking in those people who do it, and to support publishing and promoting scientific work outside the mainstream, to provide a forum of open debate, to provide a forum for serious papers and theories to be presented without fear of censorship, and to be run and controlled by our members. If you haven't visited our websites, you should. If you're new to critically thinking, go to beyondmainstream.com. It is an online magazine for critical thinkers. It's done very well. I want to start seeing us do more there, and I'll explain why we should do that. And of course, we do have our community of critical thinkers in science, physics, and cosmology. You can go that to naturalphilosophy.org and check it out. You can be registered, become a member, and chat there. I have to go in there and make sure everything's going well and running well. But it is a really great format. You can go in there and just join in the conversation right away. A lot of people chatting there on the front page. So it's sort of like Facebook. You go right there and you can see what people are talking about right now. And of course, we do have our natural philosophy Wikipedia, which is the true Wikipedia software. That has over 10,000 pages of information. And a lot of it is actually, if you Google somebody, even like myself, Google my name, you're going to see my biography from within this naturalphilosophy.org wiki come up. So it is important. If you have one there, you should make sure it's up to date and is saying what you want, because it is Googled a lot. Anytime you have a true wiki and you have that many pages, it becomes part of the overall encyclopedia search engine. So make sure you got what you want there. I go and change mine constantly, because I want to make sure it's up to date in the way I want. I always kind of change the way sometimes. I do want to thank everybody who's members. You can join, and it is important. We have $2,800 a year. I'm going to cut that down, I hope, to less than half of that. I'm going to move this over to my servers before, again, I explained this. I have a video before explaining this, but I pay for a server of my own every month, and it can host many websites. So I'm going to move it over there. That's going to save us almost $1,000 a year. So but we do need your support. So if you can do monthly $5 a month, or even less than that, if you $35 a year and upwards. And I want to thank everybody who is doing that, because we do have our supporting members who have memberships, and the memberships are automatically renewed. So if you do it per month, you don't have to worry about it. Just get it going, and it'll get that money, and it goes into our bank account to help pay for everything that's going on right now. Mostly, well, all of it online. So I want to thank our patrons: Nick Percival, Cynthia Whitney, Ramsey Pen Name, all the my father, some other members as well, and the annual and monthly memberships. We need your vital support. Please think about it. If you enjoy these, you're going to enjoy more, because we're going to start with, I think, a format's going to get more people. I really do believe we're going to get a lot more people with an idea that I came up with. I didn't come up with it. I just thought of an idea of, we'll see. Be quiet and read the slides, Dave. Don't get ahead of yourself. So, but we do need your vital support. So please consider. And we do take donations. Donations are truly welcome. It all goes to pay all the bills. That's basically it. The CNPS has its own bank account. Yes, it does. It's all the payments that we have are paid out of the bank account. And if there's not enough money in there, things will start shutting down, literally. So please consider that. Again, we're very unique in the world. I don't think anybody's doing what we're doing here. Of course, we're going to be talking today about the new directions. Are we missing the biggest audience? That's what our theme is today. And I'm going to first talk about the dissident history, a timeline. I talked a lot with Nick Percival about this, and I think I'm going to bring him up and talk a little bit, perhaps, about these things, because I did sit and talk with him. But this is the kind of thing that I observed, and he observed. I put it together and into a timeline. And in the 1970s, of course, we didn't have anything like the internet, even email, and individuals were really pretty much working alone. So there's individuals working. In the 1980s, you started to have person-to-person contacts. I know John Chappelle started doing that in the later 80s, but he was contacting people. And I do know in 1980, for example, Stephen Hurl, who is the mechanical engineer who rightly discovered that the dinosaurs could not survive today in today's gravity. That is this idea of this Jurassic Park. I guess there's a new movie coming out. I can't even watch Jurassic Park anymore because of the knowing that these creatures can't survive. They'd be big, giant, it's like, look at a beach whale, right? I know the whale is the largest animal that's ever lived, that's for sure, but it's in the ocean. But if you have let's say a dinosaur, not the biggest whale, but a half-size whale, he gets on the beach, they die very quickly. Well, he was researching this. He came up with his job was to come up with take some mechanical part and double it, and went in size. And he quickly realized that it would be 8 times the volume, or 9 times the volume. I don't remember. I think something like that. No, 8 times. Yeah, 8 times the volume. Because if you take a cube and you want to double it, you got to put a cube next to it, and you got one up, and you got 8 of them. So he quickly realized that when you doubled in size, you had 8 times the weight, and that got him thinking about dinosaurs. And that all happened in the 80s. This is a story that makes sense here with what I'm talking about. He told me, I said, how did you communicate back then? And he said, well, I basically went to books and looked in bibliographies. I looked up people. I wrote letters. They wrote letters back. It'd be like kind of like email, but snail mail. And then finally we get in contact with somebody, and then they would be able to talk on the phone. It was a whole different world out there. So that was like the 1980s. In the 1990s, you really started to have your first in-person conferences. I know the MPA, which was started in the early 1990s by John Chappelle. That's why we call ourselves the John Chappelle Natural Philosophy Society. He started the first in-person conferences, and they had very, very few people at times. And they were also, there was person-to-person kind of small conferences. They got together, I know, in people's homes. And then they also started meeting in universities, and that was the first time I got involved with the MPA. Was in 1996. I think it was their third annual NPA conference, which was held in Flagstaff, Arizona. And I flew out there and was presenting a paper about Dr. Karazani's work. And at that time, the way it worked is you would bring your papers, a copy of your paper. So they didn't have proceedings or anything like that. But if you gave a paper, you sat it on a table during the talk, and everybody would pick up the paper and kind of read it and look at it while you talk. Very kind of, it was formally organized, but it was kind of informal. You had time slots and all that stuff. But that was pretty much the kind of the beginnings of the in-person conferences. And in the 2000s, you really started to see large groups. The groups got larger. In fact, the MPA conferences had as many as 60, 70 people. They were held a lot at the University of Connecticut because Dr. Eberly Spencer was there, and she would organize from the math department, and we would be in the lecture room for the math department there. So we had quite a few of those there, but we also had people. They also had conferences in other places, including, I think in the 1990s. I did forget. I think in the 1990s, let's go back a little bit. Something to remember is the Expanding Earth people and NPA actually had a couple of international conferences. I think in St. Petersburg, Russia, and also the Expanding Earth people on their own were meeting in their own conferences, both in 1990 and 2000. A couple of the Expanding Earth were larger for their groups, maybe a dozen or 15 or so people. I see Richard Jess also said that John Chappell sent out a newsletter by mail once a month. Yeah, boy, that was pretty amazing. They typed it up on a typewriter, and they sent them out via snail mail. It was quite amazing. It was brutal, folks. I don't, it's like back in the day. It's almost like you think you're getting stone tablets and tapping away and then sending them out. So yeah, I do remember I got those. I think we actually have some copies of those. People have copies of those. Greg Volk, I think he has a repository of a lot of stuff. So anyways, back to the 2000s. That's when really the first decade of the 2000s was really the biggest, and culminated near 2010, 2011. Really large groups. You had the Electric Universe, you had Tesla Tech, you had the Cosmology Group, you had the Expanding Earth groups, which were sort of just mentioned. Oh yeah, here we go. The first. Well, we'll have to bring. Richard, you got to come on and talk with us. Come on. If you want to come into our green room, it's pretty easy. Just go to live.naturalphilosophy.org and come on. I'd love to hear some stories about that. About how, in fact, that would be an awfully good program, just to invite people who were in the beginning of the MPA and what was going on. So yeah, absolutely. UCSB, so the University of California, Santa Barbara. Oh, really? Santa Barbara is like a party school, I know now, but that's pretty cool. And I do know that there is a video on our channel, the CNPS's channel, with John Chappell, one of the very few videos we have of him. And he was doing a debate with somebody from, I guess, mainstream science, talking about special relativity. It's one of the few times people actually did that. So that was pretty cool. But these large and groups got together, and we even had one of them was in Flagstaff, Arizona. It may have been in the early 2010s, but that's okay. This kind of thing built up through this time, where we had the NPA, the Electric Universe, and Tesla Tech, and the Cosmology Group, 4 groups all together. And it was all built around the Tesla Tech people, which kind of almost took over this hotel. And it was quite good. And they still do that. That's always an option for people. But, traveling and money today, that's one of the problems. Today's having in-person conferences. People, unfortunately, as human race got richer, the average person did not. And so I think that's a lot of reason why having conferences is so hard. People can't afford it. Anyways, in the 2010s, we started really broadcasting. Started broadcasting meetings virtually. We also, in 2008, was our first Saturday morning video conferences. Even though it started in 2008, it was really came to head in the 2010s, where we were really doing things like we're doing now very regularly. And we also broadcast. Bought some equipment. CNPA bought some equipment that does live broadcasting to the internet. Still have that. It's still available. But that's just not happening right now. I think a lot of it, like I said, has to do with just finances. I noticed that our last conferences, what I was doing, I was moving our conferences to geographical areas. Maryland has a lot of people. I know that area, DC area, the East Coast. University of Connecticut, we did a bunch there. And when I would go there, we had more people. We'd have anywhere from maybe 15 to 20 people show up during the whole conference. Went up to Washington area and had it. But again, the problem is getting the travel, getting people to pay for it. It's not only the travel, but it costs money to do that. So we have to rent a room normally. We have all the expenses, et cetera, et cetera. So it's just been very difficult. And of course, with the internet and broadcast and virtual, people are questioning, why do that? Because you can have a lot more people. And the idea of doing a virtual conference is, could be still interesting. But again, that's the productions of papers is kind of somewhat slowed down. But again, that's the other thing I would say during this whole timeline is that from 1970 to 2010, there was a prolific amount of papers being written in the dissident community. I mean, a prolific. We had a couple of our conference books that thick. I mean, just ridiculously large. And now when we have our conferences, we can have as few as 9 papers. So yeah, people can write papers. It's interesting to present them, but people have now gone to publish all their papers on, the common places online, academia.edu. I don't know. Don't quote me on these because I'm not really familiar. But anyways, the 2020s, which we're in right now, of course, we had COVID kind of wipe out the first 2 years. Now we're kind of got back to more normal. I thought to myself, where are we? Where do we go? What do we do? Do we try to go back to conferences? And my feeling was, I don't think we can. People just don't have the economic ability to get on a plane and go somewhere anymore. That's become harder and harder. People's money is going for less. It goes less and less in the sense of what their spending power. The rich are doing ridiculously well. They're so rich they're moving trees around and trying to outdo each other for millions of dollars, while we don't have funding to do research we need to, or even to do travel to get together to do the things we do. So, people today are online. Again, maybe we're getting close to being able to have an online conference, but we sort of do that if we do this every Saturday. And I've got some ideas about what we can do there. Because some of the problems. So I'm sure you're all like, what is he going to say? So these are the 2 new directions that I had talked with Nick Percival about, and he is in the green room. So when I'm done doing my presentation, I'm going to bring him up. We'll talk a little bit. The 2 things that I came up with. Number 1 was doing this show. It is really hard to line up people. I have sometimes 10 people lined up, and none of them can talk. Oh, I can't talk this weekend. My daughter's got this. Oh, I'm not happy with this. I'm waiting till my book comes out before we all of these things. Getting people to actually present every week is tough. And this gives you the same idea that people aren't writing the papers like they used to. And if they do write papers, they'll write them and publish them on the online repositories. And they go, well, I got a lot more exposure there. You do and you don't. Those things are very good at making everybody who publishes there think that they're somebody accidentally or lists you in a big listing of works. They'll count that as someone looked at your paper when they really didn't. So I know we can say that they're out there, and that's great. People have absolute right to do that. More power to you. But lining people up for the specific presentation has been just pulling teeth, and it's a lot of work. And I looked at I didn't look at, I know, because I am a huge consumer of YouTube. The reason is because I have a lot of critical thinking directions I like, both politically, scientifically, niche areas that we all have, and YouTube has some of the best stuff out there. And and some of the best people who have, literally 10 million, 20 million people who watch their shows. They're really just interview shows. Basically, they just bring somebody on and talk with them. Maybe they'll look them up or get something in, but interview, just bring somebody on. Like Walt Thornhill. There's a lot of people here that are Electric Universe people. Just I talk with them. Look, Paul, I'm not here to argue or debate. I'm just going to talk to you. What are you doing? He does obviously, a lot of people like his work. There's a big group and a big following. Talk with him and just line people up and talk with them. And the other second thing I think what we need to start doing is to communicate to the public, not mainstream or other dissidents. We've tried the mainstream and other dissidents for decades, and there is some reason why we should go to the public. We can talk about that. Okay. Let's take the first point. The most successful online shows are the interview format. We can invite interesting guests and have a conversation. Very little preparation is really needed. And also the problem, because it's like, I got to do this. I got to do these slides. I have to take my Friday nights, an hour or two, to put together these slides or come up with an idea for a show. It's like, oh, gee. And so no, let's just start interviewing people. And if it's just so easy. The person doesn't have to make a presentation either. Oh, why didn't I put that on the slide? Well, it should be there, because I just make these, slides usually the day before after thinking about this for a while. So yeah, there's very little preparation needed on both sides. And it makes hosting much simpler. Therefore, there's a bigger pool of hosts. When people see what we're doing, there's a kind of a quality that I was establishing that was probably out of reach for most people, and not because I'm some kind of, it has nothing to do with me, but I did put that quality up there because I think it's very important to be professional, and that's the only way you can grow. I know that's another thing. Those people who are on YouTube channels who do this in a much more organized fashion have bigger audiences. That's the truth. If you just get on and talk about Michelson Morley and argue about that, and the people are clueless to what you're saying. Not only people are clueless, the average audience, but it can be very, even for the dissonance, like, it's just not what I want to talk about. Whereas if you have invited guests, you're going to have people who are going to come in with different points of view every week, very different things, maybe even maybe, but you will have different hosts now, because I can't make it. Just a lot of Saturdays, I can't make it. And just like anybody else. And then hosting is going to be a lot easier. You just kind of get on, do a little bit of research before who's going to be on this week. Oh, Nick Percival. Oh yeah, he's the guy who talks about time, and you go look at his videos and stuff, and then when he comes on, you can start talking with him. So I think that's really important. And I think here are some simple rules that I see for the host. So if I know people in the green room who've been here, there are a lot of people who could be hosts very easily, but I've laid out some rules that I kind of try to follow. And that is, I try to explain and draw out why the guest is a critical thinker. What got you started? That's always because that gives the audience something to relate to, because they're thinking, the Big Bang is really kind of stupid. The idea that space and time was all in the size of a pea and then exploded. Well, why did it explode? Why was it all together in the first place? And what's around it? Not universe, the frontier problem, as we call it. And so again, try to explain and draw out why the guest is a critical thinker. That's very important, I think. Talk with the guests in their vocabulary and their model. Don't try to, try to get to even the audience. So, oh, okay, when you say this, you mean this. Okay. Because we all know that as a person who has their own critical thinking usually comes up with their own vocabulary, their own model. I'm a linguist, what we call, yeah, I know, I have people who hate me in the chat because I say well, the only reason I say that is because I'm interested in language, and I do study it as professionally. It's what I've been doing for 30 years. So it's really interesting that what we call in linguistics an idiolect, like idiot. Well, idiot really means a single person. It means a person, right? It's part of it. And in idiosyncratic, it's what a person does. So, idiolect is like a dialect, but it's a dialect for an idiot. Now, I'm kidding. It's a dialect for one person. So I often, and almost without exception, every human being who speaks what we call a fully formed modern human language has parts of their grammar and vocabulary that are non-standard. I used to say conjugations when it was conjugations, and that's I'm in linguistics for goodness sakes, and I had to change that. Now I say conjugations. So I say conjure, like conjure up. So yeah, you every person who in their world, if you talk with uh, Nick Percival, he's going to be talking in the vocabulary of relativity. You're going to talk to Walt Thorne. He's going to be talking the vocabulary about electric universe. He's going to talk with Stephen Hurl. He's going to be talking or James Maxwell. They're going to be talking in geology. You try to talk with the guests in their vocabulary and also get the audience to understand that. You also want to try to understand their point of view. That's the idea. The way I look at it, I'm fascinated by James Carter. I think he was the one in the Physics on the Fringe by Margaret Wortham. Hello, Margaret. I know you get our emails and you read them. When we send out our MailChimp, I know who's reading the emails. And I know Walt Thornhill opens up our emails as well as Margaret Wortham. And he has an idea that gravity is a cause of because everything's expanding towards something. Hey, you can sit there and laugh at it. There's nobody here that can say that that's not true. So it's really understand that point of view. Open your mind. I always like to take an idea. Okay, this person's got this crazy idea, and wow, what if this was true? Really try to convince yourself as a host that what I try to do. This is true, and how would that work? Velikovsky says Venus came flying in 30,000 years ago and was captured. Think about that. That's pretty wild. Instead of going, oh, that's so stupid, why don't you think, wow, think about that in your head and how that really could happen. And that as a host, that's what you kind of want to do. You want to try to get in their point of view. So the audience gets that. The idea is open the minds of everybody. And even if you think it's garbage in the end, or you disagree with it, or you agree with it a lot, it's still going to be an eye-opening experience if you get somebody else's idea with a whole different way to look at it. So your goal is to give the audience the best and most clear picture of the point of view of your guests. And can you do this? If you can be a Saturday morning host. This is what I'm looking to change to. And I think what will be means, oh, Dave can't do it. I'm going to talk with Nick Percival. He can do that. Or Ian Cohen, and he can do that. And I'm just make sure that Ian never interviews anybody with a real physical model. Sorry, inside joke. But Ian's not laughing in the green room for that one. So anyways, I think this is really a great idea. And I think people look forward to it. And it allows us to actually interview a lot more people to open up our, palette of painting pictures of critical thinking in different directions. Just like I'd like to have Dennis McCarthy on, the guy who's showing the evidence is overwhelming now that the Shakespearean plays were copied or used or were inspired by, a lot of times even copied almost verbatim from what's his name? Thomas North. The evidence is just overwhelming. And talking with somebody like that, looking at critical thinker, why did I know him? Because he also believes in the Earth expansion. So anyways, these are the rules for a host. So if you're thinking that you could do this would be pretty good for you. I think this is one of the problems. I'm going to talk about something, and that is us trying to who our audience is. And I saw this meme, which is really great, because I am arguing on the Einstein Facebook page, which has 19 million people go, why are you wasting your time on social media? 19 million people like and follow Einstein on Facebook. So I'm there putting critical thinking stuff all the time. In the beginning, about 2 years ago, I'm actually you get these little awards. I'm like a top contributor now. You get like, oh, he's a top commentator or whatever. And so, but I get on there. In the beginning, it was just all laughs. There's about 5 or 6 people. Anything I post, they go and laugh at it because that's what happens when they have no arguments against what you're saying. And I don't attack anybody. Even when they laugh at me, I go, oh, you just missed a chance to actually try to debate something you can't. You just can laugh. You get a effing debate, things like that. But when I go there, in the beginning, I didn't have very many people supporting me. I'd be like, maybe one person would do a like on what I said when I say that special relativity isn't used in GPS or something like that. And then, all the rest laughs and stupid sophomore comments. And then now a lot more people. I'm getting half the people, and actually some of the people I know, I guess somehow Facebook lets them know I'm making comments to these places. They're starting to appear in those places. It's not bad for us to get out there, and I think that's one of the things I didn't put in the list, but that's one of the things we can do. But anyways, this is cognitive. This is what happens to people when I say go on, and they're talking about the Big Bang, and let's look at the new pictures from the Webb telescope. What's going to happen? The age of the universe is directly proportional to how far into space we can look. Every time we look further in space, they've been fiddling with the number now, 3.78 to 3.83 billion years. It's just absurd. But anyways, that was out there. So I start making comments out there, and these people, instead of arguing, going, "Oh, well, what do you say?" and then looking at it and keeping an open mind, they get into this what this has been called cognitive dissonance. Why people get upset when their beliefs are challenged, and a mental conflict occurs when beliefs are contradicted by new information. A mental one, not a scientific one. This conflict activates areas in the brain involved in personal identity and emotional responses to threats. So that's why I get laughs. Instead of somebody disagreeing with me or getting mad at me, mad is even better. Laughs is when people have no arguments with you. But where's that coming from? Well, it activates that part of the brain of, hey, I pretend to be smart, understand impossible things to understand logically, like, special relativity, which is paradoxical even in its assumptions. And I pretend I understand it. And then I put the onus on you that you don't understand it. And therefore you're the stupid one. Because it's really simple, and you got to go to school. And once you learn it, you'll know the truth. Well, those kinds of things, that's a personal identity. These people want to be smart. They want to be smarter than you. I come in and they think I'm like a flat earther who goes around, I don't read any science. And then they have this one link to my profile from this 1998 crackpot page. I said, just Google me. Google my name. You'll see who I am. I'm a serious person, both scientist and many other things. So Google my name. I'm not to worry about it. But what happens is when I go in there, this activates their brain and their personal identity. They want to be the smart one. It's like Neil deGrasse Tyson. Neil deGrasse Tyson is about the furthest you can come from a critical thinker. Oh, by the way, Bill Burr, one of my favorite comedians, he just laid into Neil deGrasse Tyson. Oh, I'll have to play that one Saturday for you guys. Look it up. Bill Burr, Neil deGrasse Tyson. He just lays into him as some egotistical person who pretends to know more than other people. That's what he says. If Bill Burr can understand that, a guy who's like zero science. Anyways, this is what cognitive dissonance is about. And then, of course, the brain alarms go off when a person feels threatened on a deeply personal and emotional level, causing them to shut down and disregard any rational evidence that contradicts what they previously regarded as truth. Now, this is what's going to happen for mainstream people who pretend that they understand the ridiculousness of mainstream science. And of course, it's also for dissonance, unfortunately. I have to say that, but it's very true. And I think that's sad. I think there's not too many of us dissonants, and I do put myself in the class that I do look at other people's stuff, and I'm first to say my dad and I have a model, could be totally wrong. And every model that I've ever seen by other people, that could be the right one. So, we unfortunately in the dissonant community just don't do it. I've talked about the etherists. They just don't look at the problems with it. They don't look at other. Go, Dave, your model's really good. It's a real alternative to ether. Never heard an etherist say. That's because there's cognitive dissonance. It says right here. It says it's the brain. It conflicts activate areas of the brain involved with personal identity, and your personal identity is working on ether the whole time. Yeah, that's what happens. Explains. Again, I'm not right, and I'm saying that etherists are wrong. I'm saying that our attitudes about that's not right. We got to kind of change that, because if we're expecting us to put up with and get people who are going to be critical thinkers and keep open minds to even look at your work, you've got work. and you have cognitive dissonance, what are they going to go? They're going to say right to your face, hypocrite, right? So that's really important. Here are some myths that the dissidents have before we get into publicly getting out to the public. Here's some myths. The mainstream will listen or capitulate eventually. Just won't. I mean, we know this. There's no point in history where this has happened. It's always a new generation. You get the old, you've heard the saying, I don't know, it's been attributed to 739 scientists that the only way for a new paradigm to shift is for the old generation to die. There's a lot there to that, but the mainstream is by definition not going to capitulate. Those are the people who are not the ants that go out from the anthill searching for in new directions no one's been to. You notice that if all ants did that, we would have no ants in the anthill. So there are we critical thinkers. I do think of us as those ants that go out and explore places that other people are afraid to. We have to understand that the majority of people are not that way, and they're not going to be that way. And the only way to sway them is not, you're not going to sway the mainstream people ahead of them, but you can, and mainstream isn't the population. The general population is the mainstream, because if you ask the person even who Einstein is, they don't even know who Einstein is. You know, the average person today doesn't even know who he is. Well, what was he? A scientist? Maybe. They don't even know. So again, we're not going to change it. People, I see this a lot in people's work, because they'll use like, oh, I have a neutrino. Oh, I have quarks. Oh yeah, I can explain dark matter, even though dark matter is a joke, because it's an ad hoc thing. But what happens is dissonants do that because they want to be accepted. If they use the vocabulary mainstream, but you know what it is? I call this the dead soldier syndrome. This is my take on it. Here's the way it's like, okay? If I go up to somebody, my goal is to communicate to a mother that her son has died in battle, or daughter's died in battle in a war. So I'm going to go up and I'm going to use super nice words. I'm going to be the politest person. I'm going to bring a chaplain or whatever, or a psychologist. I'm going to say it in the nicest way. Or I could just go up and knock on the door and says, your son and daughter's dead. Ha. Now, you tell me what the reaction of the mother is going to be. It doesn't matter. It's not the way you do the message. It's the message itself. So if you're telling a person like, well, there's this there's rational mechanics, or I can't remember somebody's alternative to, or autodynamics. My mentor, Dr. Karazani, that was his alternative, and it works pretty well. He took out the magic of the special relativity equations, and they turned into Newtonian equations. Whoa! And so he says, "Oh yeah, this is what happened. I mean, I went into with Karazani's work to 9 physicists who I said, if you do this experiment, you could win a Nobel Prize. Can you show special relativity wrong?" Back in 1994. So I did that, and then they were talking. They go, "What's the implications?" There's no neutrino. What? All of a sudden, and are you a physicist? No. Oh, and then they literally sent me out of the room. So what it is once they learn what the implications are, it doesn't matter if you show them math that they all agreed with. They're still going to get the shock of, no, it's not the same. So we got to, I don't know why we dissidents have spent decades, and dissidents spend decades working on their stuff to make their vocabulary easy for the mainstream to, oh, they'll get it. Oh, they're going to come to me because I can explain dark matter. Well, what's your implication? Well, I've got a whole new model for the universe. The moment you say that, it doesn't matter if your model's better or worse, they will shut off. So anyways, here's a myth. There will be cooperation amongst dissidents. Okay, it's my talk on my last talk in 2022, this last talk in June, was Pie in the Sky. Why? Well, Bruce Nappy, he sent me an email reminding me that from 2015 to 2019 at the CMP conferences, he came up with psychologically proven ways to get people to cooperate. Things, and it's one of the things he does. And he said, it didn't work. He tried and he tried. He put forums together and organized them in ways, and he had them like email chains going into the forums, because email chains are notoriously just like, you know, people talking that goes into these quote unquote ether, is part of my expression. I'm just using that in a general way. And it's really, it's really a pie in the sky. Unfortunately, it's just not going to happen. People will cooperate where they want. Lori Gardy is a good example. I love the way she thinks, and I love talking with her. She's got a really brilliant mind. She worked with Jeff Yee. She worked with Yonel Danu. She worked with Distinti, and now she's on her own. Well, why didn't she end up working with a person for a long time? It's not her. She's an amazing person. It's just everybody's dissident paths. When you are that ant that venture out, you're going over here and you think this little place you found is really great. This other person found, it's not like you're going to get together. You're always going to remember that place you were, kind of thing. And comparing ourselves to ants, isn't that wonderful? And of course, appealing to the public is futile. That's not true. In fact, that's the second part of this talk, and that is, I think we've tried it. Remember our, remember this? In the 1970s, we went from individuals to persons, contact to contact, and then the first in-person conferences to big, large groups, and then meeting and virtually. And then what do we do next? Well, and we can't cooperate. We try to work together. There's a lot of myths. Well, our new audience, it's a public. We don't listen to each other. The science community doesn't listen to us. We need to go directly to the public. They don't have the problem of Michelson Morley. Every time we go to a scientist, they're going to argue, or the Big Bang, they're going to say redshift. Plate tectonics, they're going to say, the idea that the Earth's gaining mass and we have no idea, and it may be subatomic, you're nuts. So it doesn't work either. So we need to go directly to public. Is that possible? I wrote an article about how it's not only possible, in my opinion, that's the reason Einstein's famous. Einstein isn't famous because of his miracle year or the photoelectric effect or even his famous equation equals mc squared. It wasn't because of just that. It was that the general public could understand the implications of what he was doing. That's why. Why do you think Stephen Hawking was so popular? Because he talked about black holes that sucked everything in. It's a wonderful story. And more than that, he was a guy who was in a wheelchair with this disease that was claiming to only use 10% of his brain and be like some genius about how the world works. That was the story. There's a lot of scientists that were way better and who probably contributed to mankind's human knowledge way more than Einstein and way more than Stephen Hawking. But it's the story. And what was Einstein's claim to fame in the sense of mass media? He was the archetype for the mad scientist. There was no mad scientist before Einstein. This whole thing with his hair and stuff, that became an archetype. It's no different than Carmen Miranda with her fruit. If you go to any party on Earth, anywhere on the planet, and put fruit on your head, they're going to go, "Oh, Carmen Miranda from Brazil." She was born in Portugal, by the way. And then you can put on that wig with the funky hair. People are going to go, "Oh, look, Einstein." These things, these ideas, these movements, and these things that people remember are things. The reason Einstein became so famous is because people could understand. I claim in my article, if you watch that or you watch my YouTube video on this, it was because Einstein talked about two things everybody is totally intimate with: light and gravity. Every human being, every being knows what gravity is. Every being knows what light is, if of course you have eyesight. And the idea that you could link the two, gravity bends light. Everybody who's at least a normal human being can get that. And that sounds genius. And why didn't someone think of it before, even if it's wrong? Lots of us think it's wrong, but of course it depends on your model. But That's why. And then, of course, equals MC squared. Oh, everything's like energy. In this phone, I have enough energy to make run all the house's electricity for 2,000 years. We just don't know how to do it. People get it. People got that. So the question is, can we? Hey, fractal woman, she's here. I talked about you. I actually said very good things about you. Work with lots of people, I said, but very nice to see you. Lori Gardy. Check out her channel, by the way. She's doing really great. So Lori Gardy, there she is, Fractal Woman. Check it out. She's got always great stuff. Always enjoy talking with her. Anyways, so the idea that the masses don't influence science, it's not true. It does. I mean, they can't understand it. And the thing that they don't understand, we're going to talk about. So the message, to think critically. That's the first thing. You have to, what's the characteristic of being a critical thinker, of critically thinking, of critical thinking? You have to be humble. You don't accept scientific truth without investigating it yourself. Don't be afraid to challenge any scientific idea. You got to get people so that they do that. Now, this is what's interesting to me. This is not the hardest problem right now. That is really what human beings around the globe are realizing, both politically and scientifically. We were told again that Iran, Saddam Hussein had weapons of mass destruction. We found out later he did not. We went in and killed Gaddafi. It turns out if you lived in his country, you got free this, free that, free the other thing. Yeah, there was other problems, but what people are starting to see, that our politicians are promising and promising and promising, and they deliver zero. All of them. They either lie to us and say one thing, or they lie to us and say another, and then they never do that thing. We never seem to get better. In the last 40 years in the United States, it didn't matter Republican, Democrat. They all work for the same people, the people who have the power and the money. So it turns out that human beings are right now very open to thinking, what I've been told ain't necessarily going to be the truth. In fact, if I accept things on face value, I've gotten myself into trouble. We have gotten ourselves into trouble. So that's something we got to communicate to people. We got to spend time with that. We have to talk to people about that and get them to understand that what happens in politics happens in particle physics, theoretical physics, the cosmology, all of these things. It happens. The people who go into these professions are what I call used card salesmen. So we'll talk about that, I think. Message: what is wrong in science? We have to talk specifically to the public. Now, we have this on beyondmainstream.org. So if you go to Beyond Mainstream, I can click on problems, and we got a lot more than this. But we have to start explaining to the public relativity is wrong, Big Bang's wrong, plate tectonics is wrong, particle physics is problematic. Most of it could be wrong. Cosmology is, is part of the Big Bang, but there's all kinds of other things like the model for the sun, black holes. What are they really? Is there dark matter? No, probably. I mean, we can explain everything with Newton, who needs dark matter, et cetera, et cetera. But the problem is, and that's what we'll talk about in the end, that's where the discussion will come in, is how do you do this? People are going to say they can't do it. The average person. If you think that's not true, then don't watch my movie Einstein Wrong, because I took my mother, who knew zero about science, to meet all the dissidents who knew Einstein was wrong. And if you asked her before she died a few years ago, she would say absolutely. The people I met were very how do you say? They're very intelligent. Their arguments against Einstein were pretty easy to understand. So how do we do that? How do we do that? Here's the new directions. Here's something my father said in a paper. He said in the proceedings from 2016, many people have proved to themselves that special relativity is wrong. They know about the paradoxes, they know about the bad assumptions, they know about mathematical errors, and yet it is still hard to provide absolute proof that is wrong. And that's true. Think about it. We talk about these things all the time. I mean, as Glenn Borchert has pointed out very astutely, relativity is the most disputed theory ever. And that is really, really the truth. But can we sit down with an average person and talk about that? I know my dad, when he was working on papers and working on his books and his model for gravity, et cetera, he was at the time driving for Enterprise to make some extra bucks after being retired. And they'd call him the mad scientist, and he'd be riding in the back of the car, and then the people would actually break, when they'd all get together and have to drive somewhere. But he would talk to average people, and I'm sure all of us have come across to that, the whole idea of talking to your friends, your family about yeah, you think Einstein's wrong, explain it to me. I don't think we're very good at it. I think we as a group, from our 1970, and now we're in the 2020s, we're really good. We found really good arguments, but can we explain that to the average person? And of course, people are going to say it's useless. No, it's not. Because if we get more and more and more people questioning it, they're going to start to see that, oh, they can't pull the wool over our eyes anymore. Just like here in the United States, over 50% of the people of our population here in the United States are not Democrat or Republican. And those are the only two parties because they don't let anything else in. So there you go. It can't happen. What we don't know, we can also communicate. This is the message we communicate to the average person. They all think these things are all known. What is light? Not sure we really know. What's gravity? What's magnetism? What's electricity? What's a field? Why is the Earth gaining mass? These are things we don't know in reality. Because when you really tell people about gravity, he says, "Whoa, what's really causing gravity?" Well, it's an attraction, but it's a physical force, and it must have some. What is it? How do we do it? And unless you're Ian, these are questions the average person, most average people, I think, are interested in. I'm kidding, Ian. Message: what are the new ideas? Well, we have expansion tectonics. We have new models for light, gravity, atomic structure. We have all these kinds of things. Yeah. So there's lots of things. I'll be talking with about some of the comments I see a lot of people putting comments there in the comments. So, what are new ideas? These are just some I threw up, folks. I didn't, I put this together. I don't have an infinite amount of time, and I haven't done this for 3 weeks. So I've just put these together. Also, attack the messengers. This is something I've been doing, but science evangelists are out there. Neil deGrasse Tyson, Michio Kiku, who looks like Einstein. We have Bill Nye, the science guy, who stood in front of me holding up a cell phone saying GPS would be miles off if it wasn't for relativity, et cetera, et cetera. And then we have universities don't allow for criticisms, don't allow for new models. I have a very famous little picture I put up that has a student who's graduating in a massive graduation signing and says, "I can't challenge Einstein relativity or Einstein at my university." Wrong. When people, here's what people think. They think that when, you found a problem like ring gyroscopes, special relativity just blows up. Ask Cynthia Whitney, who's got a PhD in special relativity, who applied that to a ring gyroscope and the Sagnac effect. It blows up. Well, you go to the university and tell them this. They go, "Oh, we know. Well, what can we do about it?" Nothing. You can't do anything about it. No one's going to listen. It's not worth it. You'll be looked at as heretic, and et cetera, et cetera. Well, it turns out that when you, as a person who's a dissident who says these things, that the average person thinks that when this comes out and Dr. Cynthia Whitney applies special relativity, it fails dramatically with the Sagnac effect, that then it goes back to the university. All the university professors and everybody around the world takes this data that's against special relativity and either throw special relativity out or modify it, and therefore science goes on and progresses. They have no idea that universities and science don't use the scientific method. They are emotional and power-driven, ego-driven institutions when it comes to physics and cosmology. And so it's just not that. And so we have to understand, we have to let the people know that, Bill Barr, again, if you're American or you're around the world, Bill Barr, I love his humor. He's hilarious to me. Go look him up, Bill Barr, Neil deGrasse Tyson. It's maybe only a minute and a half. He just lays into him. He exposes him like that. In fact, my video about Neil deGrasse Tyson laughing at the question, he got the question, is Einstein wrong? He laughed. And of course, we know that's not a scientific. Any scientist can say, yep, Einstein can be wrong. All of this can be wrong. That's the answer, but he doesn't do that. Theoretical physics and cosmology. I call them used car salesmen. Now, why is that? Because when you hear special relativity, for instance, you're sitting in physics 101 and they go, so you get close to the speed of light, mass increases, time slows down, length contracts. You're thinking, well, why? Give me a physical reason why. Give me some reason why. Oh, no, that's just the way the universe works. And so what happens, you either just you just walk out and never want to come back to that class, or you just take the test as, I don't care, I'll just regurgitate what I've told, or you not only capitulate, you go and you start becoming another salesman. And so what you have to do is kind of sort of push out all in your mind, push out all the objections that you yourself have, become like, oh, this car has this problem, and this problem, but I need to sell it to make a living. So I'm going to tell everybody, of course, this is the way it works. You don't understand until you become a salesman. You're just wrong. And so they are no better, in my opinion, than used car salesmen. In fact, I talked to the guy in my movie who is an experimentalist at the Stanford Linear Accelerator, who says he has to unteach special relativity to his grad students. When I called him a theoretical physicist, he thought, he goes, don't ever accuse me of being a theoretical physicist. So people know that. So that actually the general public thinks that physics and cosmology and the Nobel Prizes are the cream of the crop of the people, and they're really just used car salesmen who will ignore all the immense amount of paradoxes in their models and do it for ego, pride, positions. I had 50% of the kids in a advanced physics class in Long Beach, California, tell me, raised their hands and said they'd forego truth in science to get their position at a university. There you go. So our job is to explain mainstream science truth to the masses, and that's what we need to the truth about what they're doing. All right. We have to become the new messengers, and the way you do that is the new messengers. You reveal the false prophets, right? You reveal the Neil deGrasse Tyson's, Bill Nye, and Macho Kiku, which is probably the least worrisome of them, because Macho has a little bit more realistic view of science, and also revealed the bad science. You got to say, look, this is bad science, and here's why. And you have to give really good examples. We can't just say Einstein's wrong. Believe me. Why are they going to believe us more than anybody else? That Big Bang's right. Why would they believe us just saying it's wrong? We have to communicate in ways they understand. And we also have to reveal the good science. Yeah, we have a mechanism for the Earth gaining mass. It's at the subatomic level. We've got the sun blowing apart. The particles that are flowing through space are like, you've got protons. Protons hitting something is a lot different than electron hitting something. And those things are there are people saying that it happens in the D layer of the Earth. There are all these labels of the layers in the Earth. So yeah, we have that's an explanation, and people can think of that. Oh yeah, it comes in, maybe it comes through the magnetic fields, pushed down and combines together with electrons. And now what happens? Those get captured, and don't know, but at least there's explanations. There is good science out there that are trying to do that. And of course, promote critical thinking and allow for and encourage dissonance. That's the other thing. We have to be very happy to know that there are different models for the universe. Like there are lattice models, and there are ether models, and there are particle models, and whatever, that those ideas are variable speed of light. Who's out there talking about a variable speed of light? Dr. Alexander Underscore check his channel out. Really great guy. Okay. Also, widen your audience. Now you are a person. You are a dissident. You can communicate your critical ideas to the general public. Can you? Can you explain your stuff? I have heard so many dissidents get up in front of me or in the open audience or talk to me and say, this is easy. Anyone can understand it. And about 5 sentences in, if you are an average person, your eyes are glossed over it. No one has an idea of what you're talking about. Nothing. Or you can try to point to things. So it's not easy. It's sort of like teaching. You can be the biggest genius on the planet, but teaching and being a genius, well, I don't believe in genius, but being very smart um, is, are two different things. It couldn't, Dr. Karazani is a good example. He couldn't explain his stuff if it killed him to the average person. I had to spend 2 years before I could explain to a person what Dr. Karazani's work was about. And then I could explain it to my mom, and she could understand it. She really could. Now, it took me a long time. So that means if you got ideas and models and all kinds of things, can you explain it simply? My architecture teacher, I got to study architecture in college, and my architecture said to us, if your mom can't understand the big idea of your building, then it's a bad idea. Basically, in architecture, you have like 5 archetypes. You got a courtyard building, the building's around something. You've got a linear building. You've got different types of buildings, right? I don't remember them all. But if you can't explain it, hey, mom, yeah, this is a courtyard building. Oh, okay. Can you explain your criticism of mainstream science simply? There's a lot of people in our group who spend there a lot of time. Nick Percival spends a lot of time criticizing our notions of time and our notions of special relativity. Now, of course, he's a very learned person, and I enjoy very much his presentations and talk and his work. He's probably one of the foremost experts in time. Are we at a point where we explain it well? Well, Dr. Karazani couldn't do that. Can you do it? And if you can't do it, can you get somebody else to look at it so they can? Can you explain it to the average person? So that's kind of, I think, an important. And so, should we add, as the CNPS mission, should we add this to clearly and simply communicate to the general public the following: how to become a critical thinker, problems in mainstream science, and new theories, ideas, and theories. Can we do this? What should be our strategies? Who should do this? That's the kind of questions. I'm going to remove that. And I'm going to bring up Nick first of all. And I talk, but hey, Nick, I know our conversation kind of
you mispronounced my name. It's not first of all, it's Percival.
First of all, Percival. Yes, first of all, very good. My name gets crucified, de Hilster, as de Hitler. Yeah, that's not a good one. Or the clouds behind de Hilstered. But yeah, Nick Percival with Spoonerism. So Nick, we had talked about this. I think give me your perception. I think it would be interesting to hear your take, because I stole a lot of these things from our conversation. Tell me about where you think we are as dissonance. I mean, it seems like we've gone through, but tell me where you think we are. What's your opinion?
Yeah, let me go on for a little bit. I got a degree in physics from Harvard. Now, you would think that meant that I was well educated in physics. I majored in physics. When I got through, though, I'd never heard of Dingle or any other person who questioned currently accepted theory. I mean, that was beyond belief that someone would question. And at Harvard, you had 3 professors had won Nobel Prizes, and 2 more would go on to win Nobel Prizes. So it was pretty daunting for a naive student. You just sort of believe that this is the truth. And the idea that there were people with different ideas or problems in physics just didn't enter one's mind. So eventually I started looking at the twin paradox, and I just couldn't understand it. So I talked to one of the professors, and he couldn't. So after graduating, I didn't go on in academia, but um, I would write to people like professors or someone like uh, Carl Sagan and express this logic. And sometimes I'd get no answer, and sometimes, basically it's you don't really understand what's going on. So, but there I was as a dissident, but it was like I was out in some forest somewhere, yelling about my ideas. It was like no one heard. So when the NPA was created, that was a major step forward. Getting a critical mass of people together was a huge step forward. In addition, I would be able to talk to other people who had similar but different ideas. So that helped my ideas evolve. And trying to explain it to other people also helped my exposition of those ideas. And the next great step forward was going from a group of people communicating with each other was having uh, the internet carry our forum. And the next step was going to social media. So I see this new direction. To me, it's a logical next step forward. Uh, and finding the appropriate audience and the appropriate way to communicate and get our ideas out there and to a much wider audience. Now, I'll just make two tangential comments. You talked about the mainstream. We could never convince the mainstream. I'll make one little footnote on that. I tried the Socratic method on a couple of scientists, physics professors. One actually was converted, and the other one said suddenly, instead of bashing dissidents, he said, "Hey, I have to go off to do my taxes," and he never returned. But he never bashed the dissidents again. So I think I had some effect on him, even though he didn't admit it. And that method was you don't present your arguments. You know the flaw in his thinking, and you ask him a series of questions, and his answers leads him to understand that flaw. So he convinces himself. Now, admittedly, maybe it's only 1 in 100 that are that open-minded, but that is a good technique, or the only technique that has convinced some people. The other thought was, for decades, I agreed with your characterization of Einstein and Stephen Hawking and why they became famous. It was the media that saw this great story that people were interested in, and that's all the media is interested in, is getting an audience that excited about their story. So Einstein and his hair was definitely a media creation, as well as Stephen Hawking and his illness. So I think we have to factor in to this the media. How do we get the media to help us to bring in the general public? We got to have some angles that we can exploit, and so that's my basic view on.
No, I
I
think it's
see this as a next step forward.
no. In fact, you did mention that, and I didn't even have that in the timeline. That idea that you basically were individuals and you sort of got together, and then we had the internet come along, and then there's
Yeah,
social media.
yeah,
And I think this whole idea of the what you just said, I mean, and I think the idea of going to the public is social media. You're bringing it to a forum, and
exactly.
what would be that kind of shift that you would need? What would be that story that would bring people or that image? It was interesting here that Rajiv Kumar talks about it's not Einstein's fault as much as the school and college system, which produced jerks mostly. Theory of relativity seriously showing foolishness. But what I think part of it is, though, too, is when I interviewed Jack Rosenthal. He was a friend of Einstein's. He actually went to dinner with Einstein the last 2 years of his life at Princeton. And one of the comments he even made, he was totally enthralled. He thought he knew the genius of the age. Anything Einstein said was touch. It was a Midas touch of gold, all that. But one of the things what did say was interesting is that no one understood his fame. Here you had Oppenheimer and other people who were much more important in the end to physics and science than Einstein, because as much as Einstein supposedly described the universe and all that, no one could understand why Oppenheimer and Einstein's 70th birthday had to go to his door and be humiliated by, talking to him, and no, people didn't like it. People didn't like it all. So it's interesting because what in social media will trigger that? What will we do? But that's really something I really didn't touch on. I appreciate you bringing that up. So okay. Thank you very much, Nick. I appreciate it. And we'll be talking to Nick in the future for sure.
My hair is becoming. I'll
Yes,
just
there
let
you go.
it grow. And
Yeah,
I
me
think
too.
that
Look,
will
I'm
do
white.
it.
Yeah, I gotta do that there. But of course, we're just following the same myth. I could put fruit on my head and then get the same kind of reaction. So, but anyways, thank you so much, Nick. Again, wave your hand if you have any more comments. And of course, if you do want to join in on us, we do have somebody. I'm going to bring them up. I see somebody kind of new here, or has been here, and that is you can come to live. If you type into live.naturalphilosophy.org, you will come into our green room and we can talk with you. I do see James Keene, Ian Cohen, Harry Ricker, and also Harvey. I think I want to bring up Harvey, if that's okay. I'm sure he came this way, and I'd like to meet him and talk with him. Again, you can come on. I'll leave that up for you again if you want to come in the green room. So hello, Harvey. How are you?
Pretty good. Can you hear me now?
Absolutely. Oh, that's great.
This is awesome. Thanks for Robert French. He invited me to the group, and I think this is my first time showing up. And your slides are very enlightening as far as bringing things together on why, if you think outside the box or what box.
Right.
You have difficulty. So I do a lot of waving my hands when I'm an engineer, electrical engineer.
Oh my gosh. I will tell you right now, I am totally biased toward electrical engineers. They seem to have the best view on physics. I don't know why that is, but congratulations. Sorry, go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, well, what it is, and also the late Henry Dowdy, he inspired me in, I've been studying relativity for 40 years. And, I've got the Gross book, and I was looking at all the math, and it's making me go crazy, the tensor calculus. So I finally read Cron, the book of, and it's a good way of organizing things physically, if you want to build machines and all kinds of cool stuff, but it's still complicated in it. And so I like to wave my hands and talk ideas. And I think, so my passion is relativity. And the reason why, and cosmology, it's the beginning. And Einstein, I just read recently one of his papers, actually his beginning paper on teaching relativity. And he just said himself that it's very complicated, the simultaneously problem, the simultaneity issue. And he used the issue of a train and somebody on a train. And so he just abandoned the idea of trying to use physical experiments that existed and piece them together to come up with the theory of everything. That's exactly what he said, or basically.
Right.
And so he abandoned it, and the Lorentz transformation and all that stuff, Minkowski in space, whatever that is, they've kind of put it all into a single package that everybody would see as the same speed, no matter. And then, he tried to make it easy to come up with the theory of everything, and he went into total theory and mathematician. What do you call it?
Mathematician.
Magician. Yeah.
Right. Mathematician. Yeah. Person. Yeah.
Yeah. And anyway, so if anybody wants to talk, I think one thing that might help stimulate conversation and to the audience or not this audience, the public, might be talking about how we can travel faster than the speed of light, not why we can't do it.
Right.
And they're fascinated about Star Trek and all that. And I think that polluted those kinds of ideas back in the 60s, which I watched when I was growing up.
Sure.
Kind of tainted people. But anyway, if y'all are interested sometime, I would like to show or share my screen or show you some ideas that I have on simultaneity. And if y'all have a blog, maybe I can look at the chat and I can copy some links to some chats where I could, not take up all the time here now. But just so anyway, I'm an electrical engineer. It's in the power industry, the grid, the Eastern interconnection, the Western interconnection on the North American continent. I'm involved with the Eastern side, where we're expanding the transmission and a lot of these renewables that are, wind turbines and stuff. I'm involved in that kind of stuff. And I've seen that the cosmic web actually seems to be like, the transmission line grid we have now is poked into the ground. It's all over the place like this. You got different voltage levels. And if you were to make that three-dimensional, just all over the place, and you were to say that was the electric universe, but instead of hard wires, you had the plasma things that, like you were talking, Walt Thornhill and them were working at Donald Scott. Those ideas are making more sense. And it's pretty cool. But anyway, that's an introduction to myself. Let me know how I can get involved.
Well, what you can do is we can set up a time to talk with you some Saturday, just because one of the things we're going to do is interview people, but they have a choice they can present or they can just talk. So that would be that's what we're here. Doesn't matter really. The idea is that you'll be able to talk about things that you wouldn't be. Most likely your talk and what you would talk about would not be accepted as a talk at Harvard, right?
Right.
So the idea is for sure. So it was great to meet you, Harvey. I'm glad you're on board.
Okay.
Think about also supporting us, online. We do have some memberships. A little bit helps a lot because these things are paid. All this. Even StreamYard, we got to pay for. So thank you so much. And we'll have shoot me an email. Okay. And then I can line up a time for you to talk. So, okay.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So, I mean, it is, we're here again, we do the same things that we're always can do. And that is to have people come on and present and stuff. But it is interesting to me to really start to think of how Harvey was mentioning how Einstein himself was trying to explain things in an easy way. Relativity is interesting, but then of course I took the train, the idea of the train, and that's really kind of understandable and interesting. But then I put the train, I said, everything is moving relative to everything. So you got to put a train and a person on an electron, and you have to put one on a nucleus, and then all the kind of a molecule kind of stays in its place. So there's another frame of reference. You got literally an infinite amount of reference frames. How do you reconcile all that? And so that was one of the reasons I myself said relativity, has a kind of inbuilt problem in my opinion. And so I kind of pictured that in my mind. But anyways, we have our channels are open. I know we have James Keene. Hey, James, would you like to come up and say a few words here? I'm going to make him say, I'm just going to have him come up. So hi, how are you, James? You're muted. Oh, you're good now.
Well, actually, I'm just listening. It appears that you're looking for a new direction, perhaps addressing the public, quote unquote. I guess my question to you, Dave, and to the others here is what you mean by public. Do we mean, say, people with interest in physics in academic departments, both faculty and students? Do we mean people trained to some degree, BA or higher, in physics out there in the workplace, in some perhaps national or private research facilities? What exactly do we mean by the public? And I guess in each category of what we mean, if there's a list, uh, there might be different methods to approach them. Thank
Mhm.
you, and I'll be quiet because mainly I have questions and not
Oh,
necessarily
no, that's
answers.
good. No, that's good. That's a good question. The question is, who is the public? And the way I look at it is, who have we tried to communicate to, right? We have probably, I would say, via the internet. Um, this is a good way of like maybe using Nick's Percival's sort of, in person, internet, social media. And I think what is really kind of uh, interesting about the audience is that the audience in person was ourselves. That's it, right? We were the only ones at our conferences. So we were the dissidents ourselves. The audience on the internet, when we started in 2008 and making programs, were people interested in science, really. The average person isn't going to wander across and say, what are they saying about the intricacies of the Michelson-Morley and not getting a null result? Even the science people, that's kind of tough. And then we also have tried to, with our Beyond mainstream online critical thinking magazine, to try to get to the people who like science, but who are not, you know, uh, geeks like ourselves. And oh, well, I do want to thank Michael. Thank you so much again. You can contribute, and greatly appreciated. You can actually, I think you contribute on the CNPS channel as well, and that YouTube takes a little portion, but that goes and will help with continuing what we do here. So thank you so much for the super chat of $100. Greatly appreciated. So if you look at the audiences again, in-person dissidents, YouTube science people, James, that's what I would say. People watching this are more science people. Social media is a different story. Social media, you can get people who aren't necessarily even science people. They may wander across something and, Einstein's webpage, Facebook page. So Einstein's Facebook page is not only, I will almost guarantee you, it's not 19 million people who love science. You could probably just have bunch of people who love the idea of genius. Oh, there's some guy and he was, the radical hair guy, and I just like the way he thought, and energy and mass are the same, and you can go, you can't go faster than the speed of light, which I don't like. As Harvey said, that's not something people necessarily would like about it. But I would say that social media, it's social, it's not science. So what would we say there? How can you get people interested? I've been doing that experiment for the last 2 or 3 years, mostly on Einstein's webpage, web, uh, Einstein's social media page, which is the Facebook page. And like I said, I'm one of the top contributors. I got my little diamond, I guess you get. But I'm out there, and I get smashed all the time. Well, I get smashed. There's no argument. No one ever comes across to me and says, "Oh, Dave, the argument you make for dark matter being explainable by Newton, I don't agree with this part, because I see it that when you do the calculations of the non-spherical gravitational field, that I don't agree with your premise, or your father's, or Cameron Rigbisall." You never hear that ever. All they do is they do laugh, and they say, you're an idiot. Here's a link to David de Hilster's 1998 crackpot listing, which was a sophomoric thing where they just picked on people with having no idea if they're serious about things. So I would say, yeah, we want to get to the public. The public is primed right now to not believe authority. This is happening everywhere. It's something that's happened throughout history. The moment people don't accept what the truths of authority. I've even got an idea. On my political bent to go out and start being a what I call a scientific critical thinker and not an evangelist. I call them science evangelists. So that's the kind of way I would put it. Can you explain to people at a party something that's going on? A great example I use all the time is the Expanding Earth videos by Neil Adams, who passed away just not too long ago. His videos on the Expanding Earth, because that is something that blows your mind, and it's got so many questions that a person has. If they understand that, if they can go like, wow, it does fit together, that can't be coincidence. In fact, somebody calculated that coincidence at being 96 quadrillion to 1 or something like that, that they would all even fit together by making the Earth smaller. But I mean, that's something I've used numbers of times with people to get them starting to think about stuff, but something that's wrong. So yeah, I think part of the problem is if we are at if we have to explain to the public, if we have to go against the I have a PhD from MIT or Harvard or Princeton or Caltech, and I am saying the Big Bang's wrong, they're going to say, why? What's your evidence? What do you have? And we may have it, but we can't explain it very well necessarily. Or if we can, we just don't put that out there. So that's something that anyways. Oh, look, we got some people here. Dr. Charles Lucas. This is wait a minute, is it Charles Lucas? Yeah, I guess he's called Charles. I thought it was Bill Lucas. But he is a lifetime recipient award winner, a super brilliant mind with his force equations. If you haven't checked out his work, really amazing. It's great to have these people. And it's also really great to have Fractal Woman here. She did clarify that she was helping and being a cheerleader for James Lee. I was just making a point that when we do help each other, we do help. There are people who cooperate. And so in reality, she's an example of cooperation more than not. But a lot of times we don't end up latching on to that person or saying, oh, what you're doing is really great. That's one of the things that's kind of strange with me is people have models. Even we have a model, my dad and I, and you don't have people like starting to gravitate to that model and help contribute to it. It's very, very strange. So Ian Cohen, hello. Would you like to come up and make some comments? I'm sure he does. He always is interesting. So I'll bring him up. Hey, how are you, Ian? How are you?
Very, very well, thank you, David. Good to have you back again today. Very warm weather here, which is unusual, actually.
Yes, I heard. I mean, that's like incredible for you guys.
Yes.
I'm worried about you. Do you have air conditioning or at least doors and windows open?
Doors and windows open. We have air conditioning in motor cars and so on and public transport, but not in houses.
Okay, sure.
Although, mind you, the record temperature in Ireland is generally agreed to be in Kilkenny in the centre of Ireland in 1887, 33.3 degrees Celsius, which I think is about 92 degrees Fahrenheit. So much for global warming.
Yeah, exactly. Because that's what the average temperature. We have an average temperature here in Florida above that. So it's
well, indeed, average, yes. Quite
and I did see the Mayflower stone where the Pilgrims came, right, which was on the edge of the ocean. It still is in the edge of the ocean. It's not been lifted up. I think my thing about global warming is not, I said, look, let's forget about global warming and all that. Because predicting that is almost impossible. We can hardly predict the weather for 5 days in advance. Why don't we just talk about us destroying the planet? That's probably an easier one to work with, and I think that's the way I kind of put it. But what do you think about this whole idea? I mean, we have gone through a lot of history with ourselves and communication, and we have gone a long way. We really have. I've seen a lot of people in the chat saying that we have made a lot of progress, but it seems like we aren't getting anywhere. And I think we sort of understand that Ian Cohen are not necessarily going to give a talk on physics in Oxford or at a university in Ireland. But where can we go now to sort of get people thinking about this, because it's sort of like a political movement, like gay marriage. It's not, people are against it, and after a while, enough people have heard about it and it's been repeated and they start thinking about it, that eventually there's this critical mass and it flips. I think that's one of the things that happened even with Einstein. This whole idea that people could understand it. You could say gravity bends light. Every human being can get that. Now, if you talk about the null, if you say, well, there's that null problem, that null result in the Michaelis-Morley experiment, the average person's not going to get that. Now, is it our job? Do we try to explain it? Do we try to find things that are easier, the problems in science? I mean, what are some of your thoughts?
I've really got mixed feelings on these. Maybe I'm a bit on the fence, but I think you're probably right in saying that new ideas actually do probably spring from the grassroots, and the big professionals find that is the way that the climate is going of public opinion, and they actually move themselves. But I'm not sure if I'm maybe not as pragmatic as you. I'm not sure if that would be desirable. You could probably employ a specialist PR company. You pay millions or something, and they would indicate how you could change public opinion and get the whole thing to flip to the other extreme, and you possibly could succeed in doing it. But I'm not sure if it would be worth the candle. If it would be really, I'm a bit more of a purist, I suppose, in a way, rather than just want to change public opinion. On the other hand, it is quite pronounced how, and you mentioned some of these things a moment ago, things which were sort of quite unacceptable a few years ago are now the norm. And in fact, if you don't comply with them, you're considered outside the pale. For example, the United States conception of your country or something like that. A few years ago, it was quite the contrary of what it is now. You were all, well, we used to think that you were all very patriotic, and you didn't question the founding fathers and the American flag and all that. And now you seem to have destroyed everything. Forget about history, or a terrible lot. The whole history is bad. Tear everything down. So this is what public opinion can lead to. One extreme or another. And I'm not sure if that alone is the right thing to do. Now the other thing is that I'm just thinking that earlier on, maybe when I was at college, certain counter arguments of the mainstream were put forward, really as sort of straw men, and they were just dismissed. So, for example, one point was the whole concept of maybe Stokes's ideas of maybe a dragged ether or something. And I can remember as an undergraduate hearing that, oh, that's just a jelly ether, some ridiculous idea, philosophically it's unsound. And it took me about 50 years to come back to it and consider that actually there is something in Stokes's ideas. These are sort of ideas that were occurring to me as you were speaking.
Yeah, I mean, it's not easy. I'm not going to say, Ian, that I have the answer, but I think part of it will be, and this is just my hope, is that when we now start to concentrate on our messaging, what we have, I will tell you, it's just something from my own experience. I don't think people understand how simple for instance, the model for light my father came up with. I don't think people understand. I'm not even sure you understand. And I'm not saying that this is my goal or anything, but is it the case of our being able to explain even amongst ourselves something at a very basic level, at a very fundamental level? A lot of times we don't really understand. We don't get that. And I think if we start forcing ourselves to try to be able to explain what we think is wrong, or what we think ether is, to a person that's just at a party, like you had mentioned. I think didn't you give like some talk to some poetic group or something like that? Was that you?
Oh, yes.
So yeah, you were talking about, you're not so sure, but you were out there You were a hypocrite because you were actually doing that. I'm kidding, of course. You were actually out there in a totally non-scientific group talking about something more scientific. Isn't that true?
That is true, but there were 2 points there, I think. One was even though it was in layman's language, they said, we couldn't understand this, is beyond us, it's so complicated. It's most interesting, yes, you have our ears, but it's most interesting. And then when they wrote down, a couple of sentences about what I had said, they said the opposite. They said, he said that that light speed is constant, independent of the motion of the observer. Where I said, it's not constant. They left out the word not.
But so they were listening. So they were, yeah.
They were somewhat listening, yes. But yeah. they were already frightened, actually.
Yes, they are. They are. Yeah. And the thing is, I think if we start trying to do this more, that it's just going to be a constant messaging. If we can do it so that someone can repeat it, and that another person can repeat it. I know when my father and I had to give a talk to all of our friends and family, we didn't have dissidents in our house. Maybe one who was a friend of mine who followed my work in the NPA and the CNPS and, even our model. But I had to explain to my wife. She had no idea what the book was about. And when I sat and I thought about it, can you communicate this? It was really enlightening to me, because it really pointed out that what's your, the old thing where you get in an elevator, you have your 30-second elevator pitch. How do you pitch to someone in 30 seconds that the Big Bang is wrong? How do you do that? Because if you have 30 seconds and can do it, you have a really good chance that that person will remember it, right? So most likely, if you go back to your club, some people are going to say, oh yeah, he talked about the speed of light and the observer and stuff. You got somewhere to that point. My father at his church, for instance, he went to the church and he was talking about science in general. He wasn't even talking about the particle model per se, but he spent some real time trying to get people interested in things. I mean, something as simple in physics, which is my father and I talk about all the time, push and pull. The idea that there's a pull, there's no pull in physics. There's only a push. Even when you get a coffee cup, he'd always use a coffee cup. He says, okay, I'm going to have this coffee cup. I'm going to pull it toward me. Everyone says, yes. And they go, okay, look at my finger. In physics, what is that finger doing? It's pushing the cup, right? And so it really kind of does two things. I think trying to explain it to the general public will make it more intelligible at a very fundamental level. You, me, and anybody else who's listening to your ideas, your ether ideas, I'm going to get a better sense of what you're talking about, because it's all this stuff we talk about, the fanciness and you looking at equations, all that. I really do think that even at everybody's learning turns on very fundamental things. It's not like, the mathematics of Dr. Karazani, who found the mathematical flaw in the special relativity equations, corrected it, and he gets this equation that's Newtonian, that you sit there and explain those things. But if you explain to people, he says, well, all Karazani says is that there's only one three-dimensional space in the universe, and all you can do is move your origin where you're going to measure from. That's it. That's all you can do. You can't, it's not this idea that there's some type of frames everywhere. There's frames. But, it took me 2 years to say that, but he never sat down with me and said that. If he would have said that, I would have understood that much, much quicker. So I think the sort of mental exercise that you had to go through in some sense, right, to speak to the Poetry Society or whatever it was, you really were forced to look at things at a kind of fundamental level.
Yes, I suppose that's right. And the other thing is I can see two counter forces. You talked correctly earlier, David, about there being a lot of criticism nowadays. I mean, certainly if you go into the internet, all authorities criticized. And that they're seeing conspiracies everywhere and so on. On the other hand, you're seeing a sort of authoritarianism generally in society, in everyday life, and people believing the experts and not questioning them. And it being a very intolerant society, in fact, because the media and the politicians and have a sort of a standard view, and you're not allowed to question it. I mean, in the past, just in the media, you would see maybe a person would give a view, and the interviewer was just there to allow the person to give the view, and so on. But nowadays, there's the media has a particular bent, and you can see straight away. Well, I say that if the interviewee is saying something which is contrary to the policy of the station, the interviewer says, "No, I'm going to stop you there. That is incorrect. That's disinformation. Yeah. That's dangerous. I'm going to stop you." And if he's saying something which is conducive to their view, he's, "Oh yes, I see your view. That's very good point. I was, instead of being independent."
Yes, so in fact, I've even seen broadcasts, many examples of broadcasts where someone was going against the narrative of the companies, and that basically media is companies, and those companies have a point of view. They're the war machine, whatever it is. And I've literally seen when someone starts to really go at their juggler, I think, oh, we've lost them. I'm sorry. It seems like, and then they go away. Our community, and it's exact. I mean, it's so transparent as to what's happening. The other thing that's really interesting too is that, unfortunately, when I have seen a shift too. When I've been on social media what I do is put links to beyond mainstream. I put links to books like the Higgs Fake by Dr. Unziker. And so I put all these things there. I give people really things to. I said, don't believe me, go and look at it. You get lumped in with what the public thinks is the flat earthers, the people who don't believe in climate change, all these things. And the moment they find that out, they shut you off. They don't, and that's why with climate change, I get friends of mine who know I'm into science and like science and read a lot. And I actually have the ability, one of my abilities is to explain things more in the layman's terms. I've always had the bigger picture idea. So I can do that. And when they start talking about, what about this climate change? Is it really happening? I'll get somebody who doesn't believe in it. I go, look, I don't even think of that. I always say to a person, can we predict weather for a month in advance? No. I said, so what are we doing with climate change? We're saying to the world, we can predict what the temperature is going to be like from this incredibly complex ball with all these things it's going to be like from 30 years from now. I said, but we all know we're destroying the planet, right? We're doing animal agriculture who washes down these chemicals into the ocean. That's killing the ocean. We're doing all kinds of things. We're all these kinds of things. When I was growing up about pollution and destruction and, deforestation and all this stuff, we are kind of playing with something that's delicate. I said, why don't we concentrate on that instead of, and I think if we can come up with arguments, if we start just banging our heads against the wall saying, okay, how can we explain this? I've either, and we just try things and we fail at those things. We try arguments, it doesn't work, it doesn't move things. But if we are constantly vigilant, trying to at least do that, so that when you sit down, Ian, and you're at some pub or you're at some party and this happens to me all the time, people will come up to me and say, oh, science. They'll come up with me and start talking about something, and I'll give them straight talk. I will not lie to them. I won't try to convince them of our particle model or anything like that. They'll just ask me a question, and I'll give them an honest, and like, what do you think about this whole thing about, there's the thing of the Big Bang? I go, well, that's if you think the Big Bang's correct, because a lot of people, the Big Bang is kind of a crazy idea. And they go, what are you talking about? And I go, and I tell them, think of the universe as this big and it explodes out of nothing. Why does that happen? What's around it? Not universe, because they say space and time, it doesn't make sense. And I said, every time we get another telescope, we see further out. What do we see? We see galaxies that are mature, just further away. So and I talk to people like that. What are the arguments that we can get so that when they go to beyond mainstream, that we can get someone talking about ether and why those are better models than, whatever we have today? Can we explain that to someone? Does that make sense? And I don't know, but I think it could come down to we ourselves need to be able to more fundamentally talk about what we are against, what we see as wrong, and be able to explain it a little bit more quickly and more convincingly. You can say the Big Bang's wrong, but can you give somebody to hold on in 30 seconds that they're going to go, oh, and I've tried things. So I'll say something at parties and they can walk away. Then I'll say something else. And for some reason, then the next thing I'm walking away, what do you mean? That makes sense. I never thought of that. Yeah. What are those things? I think maybe we need to start floundering around to see what those things are. I mean, I think it's interesting too about this thing Nick said. If you do this enough, and you had mentioned it too about this whole thing, that eventually something will flip. If you get enough out there that people are starting to question. Look, Bill Burr. I don't know if you know him as a comedian.
I'll have a look at that later. I don't know who you mean.
I couldn't believe it. I saw this just last week. He laid into Neil deGrasse Tyson. He just stripped him bare in about a minute and a half. Saying this guy wants to get on there and pretend he understands all this crazy stuff that no one understands, and maybe he's a bunch of garbage anyways. And he does it because he wants to be seen as like, I'm going to impart upon you this. I mean, people are even. It used to be that when I first had my video come out, you know what people said about my video against that was talking about Neil deGrasse Tyson. They go, "You're so brave. I always thought he had a big ego, and so you said it, but." I agree with you. His ego seems to be this big, and when he was confronted with, is Einstein wrong? And he goes, that's what he said. I literally, in my video, I repeat that in slow motion, like, this is an answer. And so if this is happening, like you said, there is questioning going on. I mean, 50% of Americans do not like the Democrats or the Republicans, but the people still have a chokehold on it. I mean, the system still has a chokehold on it. This whole thing that Trump says that the elections were rigged. The United States elections are controlled by a machine that you can hack. An 11-year-old can hack into. And I know people who are politically astute here who have gone to California and tried to watch the counting process that's going on. I'm not saying that happened for Trump. It doesn't happen everywhere, but I know here in our county, the next door county, Debbie Wasserman Schultz and Tim Canova, a friend of mine who ran against Debbie Wasserman Schultz, who was the evil mistress of the Democratic Party, they were going neck and neck at 34% in the exit polls. By law, the United States says in 2% difference, you can question it. When he questioned it, they destroyed the paper ballots, which is against federal law. And then that the results were he got 3% and she got 54% when the exit polls were saying 3%. They manipulated the counting. And we see that. And so I'm not saying again that that happened with Trump, but can it happen? Yeah. I'm a software engineer. We need to have paper ballots. I look at Brazil. If we look at the UN, the United Nations, the United States integrity of elections because of the machines we use are like down 57th. I mean, the United Nations ranks our elections as being not reliable. And you're right. We have this ability now to use this point where, like, I don't care. Neil deGrasse Tyson says that the Big Bang's right. Maybe it's not right. But if we are there armed with real stuff and not just say it's wrong, I know it's wrong because my friend's from MIT, we need to come up with real arguments about that. So anyways,
and dare I say it, just maybe in complete, I mean, perhaps some of us are not the most diplomatic ambassadors. There's no point in being sort of insulting to people or dismissive or cynical. And if you try to make the argument maybe strongly, but having more respect for the other person, it might in the long term be more conducive.
Absolutely. And that's why I think it's really important for all of us to have that attitude again amongst each other. That's why I call the people in the lecture universe awesome, because they're out there trying something new, right? They are out there. They are not afraid to go against the mainstream and come up with some ideas. And there are a lot of things that the Electric Universe people have said that have made me think and me look at stuff. I don't, it's not to say that they're right or wrong, to say that Velikovsky's wrong, that Venus didn't fly in 30,000 years ago. The truth of the matter is, the only thing I could think of, if people come up with models of the universe the way it's working right now, and they did, Newtonian physics around it and couldn't really come up with any model that we would see this kind of wobbling going on if that happened, and we would have evidence. I can't say that Velikovsky's wrong. I can't say that. I wasn't here 30,000 years ago to see Venus flying in. We have to have that attitude more. We have to have what I think these electrical engineering attitudes, like my dad, that says, like, look, we're lucky. The best thing we can do is say we're less wrong than the people before us, right? We just have this arrogance. When I go on social media and I'm arguing against the Big Bang, and people, they just laugh. I said, I literally put in it was, I think yesterday or today, I put, okay, everybody, because I'm talking to the other people, because there's a lot of people watching these channels. There's millions of people, right? So I put on there, it says, for every laugh you can count an arrogant person. And if you think about it, yeah, I mean, that's hard to argue against me. And the other thing, you're right. It's not everybody who has the ability to be out there and be spokesman. I know a Brazilian musician who plays the pandeiro, looks like a tambourine. Immensely talented. It's ridiculous the talent he has. I went to his class. He was terrible. He couldn't teach it. And so there are certain people. Karazani, super brilliant man. Brilliant. His work is amazing. His work with the neutrinos, no one's come close to doing as well as he did on that. And yet he couldn't explain his stuff. He talked in mathematics. And if you didn't understand mathematics, you were screwed. You didn't have anything you couldn't see. So I think you're very astute in saying that we need to try to, come up with, not only, we have to have people that can do that as well. And I think that's not easy to find. So any other thoughts, or that's enough?
Well, I think maybe that's enough for the moment. It's all quite interesting, and I will be thinking about it further. And I hope we do come back to this.
Yeah, I'm going to challenge people. And my challenge to you is, can you give the talks that you do on your alternative Saturdays to a layman? Can you do that?
So what do you mean, my talks on alternative?
Yeah, I saw. Yeah, you guys. I know once in a while you guys have your own.
Oh yes,
recordings. Yeah. So I'm going to challenge, and that's what I want to do to everybody. Challenge them. We have our particle model. Jeffy has his model. Ethers have their models. Person who thinks the Big Bang's wrong. And even as a group, we should have something for the Big Bang, special relativity, that can come out of all of our mouths that are pretty similar, that will at least get a person that says, yeah, the Big Bang has this problem, and the average person can understand that. And I that's why I've already tried to cultivate that through my own, the whole idea that this thing I keep repeating about the universe being a P, and that space and time in the universe itself is expanding. And I tell people, I goes, okay, if the whole universe is here, where is it? And they go, the universe? Oh, no, that's all here. What's the other stuff? And they go, wow, that's weird. Yeah. I said, that itself makes you think this is a wacky idea. Don't you think that the universe, and then I talk about, universe seeing, I got a big argument right now. I literally generated 100 comments in the last 2 days, because I went on and said to the people who were with the web, James, the photographs, I go, hey, it's really weird. How come we see the life cycle of planets and stars and even galaxies now, kind of a life cycle, born and reborn, and we're made of stardust and all that stuff? That doesn't bode well for a Big Bang. And people start, yeah, I mean, it seems more like an eternal, what I'm saying though is, how do we come up with these arguments that we could put on a page and say,
I think we certainly need to address that, and maybe assemble a sort of a suite of talks that are more aimed for the general public. When the late Alf Kelly, commenced giving his lectures in the 90s, maybe sort of public lectures, in those days he had two overhead projectors. One was the technical one and the other was the general one. And he said, well, look, don't worry about this technical one. If some of you are interested in this, here's the thing. But here's the simplistic one for everybody else.
Yeah, very good. Boy.
Maybe we could think in terms
of
that.
No, I think that's very good. And I think what I would challenge everybody is to say to them, to yourself, can I present to, the third graders? Can I present to my mom? Can I present to people that are just friends of mine? And, and I think a lot of the problem is a lot of the things that mainstream science talks and tells them, they don't ever give them a reason. They don't ever give that. And then when a doubt pops up in their mind, like, if you tell a person space and time itself expanded, come on. I think every average person's going to go, that doesn't make sense. But yet they say, oh, it's easy to explain. And no, it's easy to explain, but people don't buy it. And I think the thing that this person who is lecturing is trying to do is the stuff that you have to put up isn't just simple to explain. It's got to be believable. And I think that's a key. So, okay, where are we? We're 5 minutes away. So thank you so much, Ian. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Ian's always great to talk with. And I want to thank everybody who's come out. I do challenge everybody here. I want to thank Fractal Woman. Go check out her channel. Love her stuff. It's Lori Gardy. I want to thank Dr. Lucas, one of our Lifetime Recipient Awards. I want to thank everybody else who comes by in the chat. I do see lots of people. I'm sorry I didn't get to the chats as much. I want to thank Nick Percival for having this conversation with me. And I do want to say for sure, I have people in mind that I think could be hosts. Hosts don't have to do so much when we have just conversations. We don't have to do what I do and we can have some slides I can send to everybody, which is kind of the opening slides. You can learn how to do that. Hey, we're this organization, please. We do need to sell that. And I do want to thank again, Michael, who has made several contributions that goes right into $100. You can make a super chat that goes into our bank account, and we'd be very happy and pleased to have that help out. But I mean, being a host and asking questions, even if you don't have questions, you need help, I can always give you some questions to ask, etc. My goal with that, the interview style, is to have us here every week and be able to talk. We do have, that's what I'm going to do, because I was thinking I've got all these lifetime award achievements we're going to give out. We got a lot to give out, actually. I was thinking, that's a lot of preparation. No, we can just have the people on and talk with them. And if you look at these people who are making literally tens of millions of dollars as hosts on YouTube or on Spotify or wherever the podcasts are, they call podcasts even though they're videos, they just sit down and talk. Yeah, they do some research, they bring up some stuff, but we can do that. We can do it every week. And I think that's going to be a lot easier than some, subject like this. And the way I'm doing it, it's not conducive. So please think about it. I know Nick Percival is somebody I would certainly point to as a person who could easily be a host. I mean, Ian, you're a kind of bigger thinker. I don't know if you want to technically do that. You seem to be more of a sit back guy, not a technical. I know Nick's more knows a lot about computers. But again, if you are interested, if you're a person who watches this, you think you can host and that'd be interesting for yourself. I guess the way I look at it is something you can learn for that day, right? You're going to be hosting that day and you're going to be talking to somebody who's going to open up your mind and that kind of thing. And then the other thing again is let's see if we can start presenting for the average person. And that forces you to go to the fundamentals of what you're trying to do. A lot of times we get so involved with the details, so involved that we don't really, worry about like the big picture, and we start to lose sight of that. And losing sight of why you're even doing something, or is this worthwhile? When I always taught a class, I taught undergrad class, and when I was in college, and basically, I always ask why. Why are you sitting here listening to me talk? What's important about that? So thank you so much, everybody. I appreciate all the people in the chat as well, all the comments. And let's close this out. Remember what I always say, stay critical, stay thinking. I'm Dave de Hilster, your science therapist, trying to get you to the promised land of becoming a critical thinker. Ciao for now.